So I've got a question for you. I wonder what it was that you were fearful of when you were little. I'm pretty sure that all of us had something that we were afraid of when we were growing up. I'm going to tell you about the evil poodle at number 8 in a minute. But what about yourself? Was it the dark? Was it the bogeyman or the boogeyman or something like that? Maybe you're frightened at times of burglars in the house. Or spiders. Maybe that fear still exists. Maybe it's the fear of the tax man, but that's probably a developed, mature, later fear. But let me tell you then about that evil poodle at number 8 Manshill Avenue. I lived at 15, and so to get to my house, I had to wander past Mrs. Sturrock's house at number 8, and she had the most ferocious poodle that had the biggest canine teeth that the world has ever seen. And I used to suddenly be very conscious when moving from number 4 to number 6. That was her house, and was that dog in the garden? I remember one time pinging down the road with his little poodle chasing, yapping at my heels, getting in the house and breathing deeply, and showing my mum the teeth marks where that animal, that brute, had tried to rip my leg off. We're thinking this morning about fear and the resurrection. See, I was listening in the car to a report of some people exploring potholing in Norway, and the reporter said it was the most frightening thing he'd ever done, disappearing into a tiny hole in the ground and quickly being enveloped in darkness and feeling claustrophobic as the side of the shaft restricted movement. And then at one point, it was necessary to abseil down to the cathedral cave. I still don't actually remember what he saw there, but what I do recall from that interview was his breathing was short and sharp, his legs were like jelly, but he had managed to keep moving and to get out again. We read in today's gospel passage the disciples were living together in a locked room for fear of the Jews, fearful that having seen their leader, their teacher, their master crucified as a troublemaker, the authorities would now come for them. Who could they trust? How could they get food quietly, secretly, fearfully living for their lives? Fear is one of our base instincts, but also it's something that drives us as human beings. Fear of failure, fear of the unknown, fear of not being liked. And in this time of coronavirus, when we are locked in, fear of the future perhaps, fear of meaninglessness, fear of insignificance. What do you feel you would say your fears are at present? It's such a strong, stark little word, and yet I think we'd kid ourselves if we think our behaviour is always fearless or liberated beyond self-doubt. I'm currently trying to do the Ignatian exercises. These involve a series of readings and questions set up by St. Ignatius that drill deep down into who we are so that we acknowledge our true and God-given identity, and then begin to see God's dealings through our lives. Such detailed self-examination can be hard, but at best it is searching after an authenticity that roots us. At such a time as this, we may well need to examine again the basis of our self-understanding and what part fear plays in that. At Easter, we celebrate Jesus defeating death and meaninglessness, recognizing this life has purpose and consequence. We celebrate Jesus defeating evil powers by his self-giving love. The other passage that we read this morning was 1 John, which reminds us that true love casts out fear. But note, as much as we desire to live in true, authentic love all of our lives, we must pursue it, and none of us are not prone to reducing the quality of that self-giving. It is therefore a joy for me to read in the Gospels Jesus coming to his fearful disciples and saying to them, time and time again, don't be afraid. Look, I know how you're feeling, but I am with you. He doesn't say, don't be afraid, I've got the future sorted. He says, don't be afraid, I am with you. In fact, in the passage we read, he says more than that. He says, peace be with you. And this, coming from Jesus, is not an easy peace. It is spoken by a Saviour whose hands still show the marks of the nails. Peace. Don't live out of fear. Be true and live generous, self-giving lives that connect with the divine. Peace be with you. It's more than saying that things are okay. It's a blessing. May the peace of God, which passes all human understanding, guard your hearts and minds in the love of Christ. Guard your minds when our minds are tempted to be anxious, flighty, and bewildered. Peace be with you. This cannot be a cold, supercilious religious phrase, but is to be what we live and breathe this week. May you let go of fear and fully embrace the love of God. And so may the Lord bless you and keep you. May the Lord make his face to shine upon you and grant you peace.